changed from the days that you started.
Upstairs in the lounge upstairs.
Yeah.
It's true.
Big change.
So you'll be speaking from here,
Yeah.
and so you have it built into the monitor as well, so you can
Terrific.
see,
That's exactly what I wanted.
and you can
And then I can do it from here
you can do it
too.
from there too. Yep,
Great.
yep. And this gentleman's from the AV department, and
Hi.
he'll be over here. If you, if
Let me ask
anything-
you something, because that's normally, is it normal when you have that? Is there a way for me to be able to see which slide is next on the,
If you do, it'll also
will
pop
show
up
up
on
on
the.
it will pop up
yeah.
on that? I see. Hey,
How you doing? I just wanted to say hello, congratulations, and
thank you. How are
you're
you?
not going nowhere for real.
Well, I'm gonna
can't
still be in New
retire,
York.
so
No,
what?
I carefully, if you read it carefully, I said I'm retiring from MTA.
Beautiful.
That's different than retiring. I wouldn't know what to do.
Live, right?
Send it to you, it's a pleasure, pleasure. You-
The mic is live right now, so any conversation you have for the moment probably should have over here.
I see.
Yeah, we edited, but we're live streaming.
Okay, I just wanted to
How you doing?
know.
Just wanted to introduce myself and let you guys take care of business in here. Michael, all right? The best,
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wanting to make sure.
I was gonna check on his. I didn't want to mess with what you have here.
That's fine. You can always go back and forth.
Okay. It would have been on the first slide. Yeah, can you show where the notes?
Yeah, you had to put it there.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
There's the view for PowerPoint. You
Oh,
can
okay.
see like whether there's notes in the bottom of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Attitude.
Oh yeah.
Feel better for himself. They knew what kind of kid they were gonna have.
Yeah, they were supposed to.
Oh,
Oh,
wait,
yeah,
so
so
we're
your
wrong.
presentation.
Okay, here we go.
Connections, so go up one. Click here. They didn't add the notes. Can you click here, see if they had it at the bottom there? They didn't add it. Okay. Thanks, that's what I needed. You can put it back to your regular.
For the toggle purpose, I might have screwed that up. So we had to check the notes. You just want to make sure when you toggle, it'll go back to the screen, the New York Law School screen.
That's about what it is, 4.4. So I don't say that.
You want to go to,
Hi, how are you? Yes, the on the landing in the back. Yes. The middle landing. Yes. Yeah, that's already taken care of. Yeah, don't worry. Got it.
you want to go back to the screen? moved it.
Yes, I think you have to go back to the desktop. 'Cause
Yeah.
I did it to minimize it, and the other one came up. Minimize this for a second.
Okay. Yeah.
So where?
That's the older one.
See, there it is, right here.
Yeah, and then we just gotta get out. Okay. So.
You can't figure it out.
Just gotta bring this back up. Hang on. What I'll do, I'm gonna leave this up. Gosh.
If you can't figure it out, you can't figure it out.
Let's do this. And then.
Like, I don't want to be playing with this while people are walking in now.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I got this sorted out. Let me just go on. I'll sort it out.
All right, thanks.
I read somewhere that, if you go into the garage, you're gonna become a car. But
So they want the logo up first?
yeah, I think I bring rain or snow.
Just don't have escape, right? And then they'll be right next to each other.
Okay, so when he gets to the end of his presentation,
They're all tagged. They'll be right next to each other.
yeah, and then when he gets to the end of that, then I'll just hit this again, right? That's what I did.
It looked like it was closed out. So these two are the slideshows.
Yeah.
And these two are the main files.
Right, okay.
So it looks like someone would have hit escape on this, and then this would just be present by itself. So if that were to happen, just select the main thing here, if you have 5, pop-up presentation, and then you can just line them up again. So, because the way this works is whatever you selected last is going to be next in line. So just line it up that way. Do they want this up first or
That up first.
this one?
Yeah. And then at the end, I'll just toggle back to
Yeah, just alt tab,
Yeah.
and be all set.
Oh, you saw me doing that?
I was hopping down anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because after we lost it, I was calling you, but you didn't pick up. And then as soon as I walked over, I saw you walk.
Oh, okay. Oh, you just called?
Yeah, I just
Oh,
called
okay.
upstairs.
'Cause I saw this call from a few minutes ago. I was running around, so.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
But then I was gonna come down anyway shortly before
Yeah,
this.
because there was, and then you heard the guy. You wanted to change the lights.
Yeah. Which you can't just for the cameras. I just stick with this one, you know.
Just kept saying.
Right with the screen.
Yeah.
Here's the thing though. It's on the background until we're slide.
Yep.
Everything's gonna be white then.
Cool.
So is this the validation?
Yeah.
I think that's why I think there will be some discussion about.
The rules by building, that's a. They should cancel the arts. Never really ever give you anything. They post. Yes. Because I don't get the support. Team builds without the support. And then
Isn't she somebody? Hello.
I know, good morning, how are you? I bet I do. Jerry, now, Michael, strand for you. I do too bad. It takes up more energy. More energy. No question. Yeah, what is that? What do we call it? Oh, I did, but it doesn't cost.
Let's go in there. So I can say that you are right. Whatever reason.
Hi, I'm Neville Bhagwani of Chadla Contracting. We met in the past. We're looking forward to your remarks, especially on the second phase. You know, if you can
Well,
talk
second
a little bit
phase
about that.
is, given that we are gonna try to get money from Washington.
I know, right? That's the real challenge.
That's
right?
the real challenge.
Yeah, you saw the article in the Times, obviously.
Absolutely.
And, we need to do something.
I've seen many of them.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Well, we're hoping something will break. You know.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I do business development for
Ah,
Chadla.
for Jadla.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay,
It's good to meet you.
good meeting you.
Yeah, it was like 8. I'll check it. I understand, but, I actually talked to Mike this morning. Hey, Sid.
Tell you, I've been admiring your program from afar, and to establish a niche of this law school to do these kind of things is pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
no.
you. I'm glad you're here. We usually do it in another room, this time we're in the auditorium. Good morning, everybody.
Can you hear me?
Good morning, everybody. I ask that you take your seats. We're about to begin. If you take your seats, why don't you sit? Why don't you sit right there? Yeah, we're going to start right now.
Not good.
Sid. There you go. Okay, can't hear? You can't hear. Did you turn it up? Welcome, everybody. But he can't. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to New York Law School. I'm Ross Sandler, Director of the Center for New York City Law and a professor of law here. I welcome you to the 141st City Law Breakfast. Normally, we were in the event center, but this law school's facilities have become so popular, sometimes we don't get all the rooms we want, so we're down here in the auditorium, which itself is a wonderful facility. Normally, you're greeted by our dean, Anthony Crowell. He was summoned to an important meeting of the ABA where they are visiting and accrediting the law school, something that they needed him for, and he's not here, so he sends his apologies. I'd like to first thank the special sponsor of this particular breakfast, the law firm Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron. Sid Davidoff, where's Sid? Our good friends. Stand up, Sid. It's not often you get to introduce somebody who was in the Lindsay administration, and we welcome you. And then also the New York Sandhogs Labor Local Union 147, Richard Fitzsimmons. Where is he? Richard, thank you also. And then we are very fortunate to have founding sponsors who really sustained these breakfasts over a very long period of time. First, Con Edison has been with us from the beginning, Verizon as well, and the law firm of Greenberg Traurig, and we're very grateful to them. We're also grateful to all of you who contribute, and those are the Gold Star nameplates that contribute to help support these breakfasts. I'd like to call your attention to a couple things that on the tables. One is the City Law, which we publish. It's now in its 22nd year, hard to believe. And there's a subscription form, those of you who might be interested in subscribing. I hope that you do. And then also on May 5th, we're having our annual Civic Fame Awards, in which we give out every year. And then we publish our annual report, which lists the name of every person who's given even $1 to support these important programs. And there's a, if you're interested in contributing, there's a form as well, and you'll be in the annual report on May 5th. Today, it's a very special breakfast. We have two speakers. That's unusual for us. And I'd like to introduce them first, introduce them in the reverse order. First, as the Commodore Rick Cotton will be the person following Micah Radnachanu. Rick Cotton is now the person in Governor Cuomo's office that's overseeing the construction of the major the mega projects, including the Second Avenue subway among them. And but it comes to this position with an extraordinarily successful and varied career in both government and the private sector. A star student, Harvard, Yale Law School, clerk for Judge Skelly Wright, then on the Supreme Court for Justice Brennan. I worked with him in the 70s at Natural Resources Defense Council, and then he moved on to a government where he was an executive secretary in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, working with Joe Califano, and then Department of Energy with John Sawhill. He moved into the private sector in the health area with Joe Califano, and then also into NBC, where he was general counsel and led CNBC in Europe for a number of years. He's now retired and moved back into government, and I think that's what's wonderful, but they're going back and forth, and now has these important responsibilities with the governor. He was a speaker at one of our early breakfasts, our 12th breakfast, October 25, 1996, when he spoke about health care, and I remember that talk very well about the issues of primary health care, and it was an extraordinary talk. The featured speaker is Micah Radnachanu, and Micah Radnachanu also was a speaker here on October 14th, 2011. And he, at that time, explained how he was going to build the Second Avenue subway. He was then, as he was now, the president of the MTA Construction, responsible for actually building the Second Avenue subway. I went back and looked at that talk and found on October 14th, 2011, Mike had a slide about the budget and timing of the Second Avenue subway. And you can go on our website and you can see it. And right there in the slide, he said the budget is $4.4 billion and the completion date will be December 2016. Now, that's 5.5 years ago. It was not all easy, as we will hear, but it is remarkable to see a public pronouncement of that magnitude and see it actually mature. Mike Radonjianu was born in Romania, grew up in Israel, graduate of the Technion, PhD from Polytech, a very successful businessman in New York, did a similar thing to what Rick did, moved into government where he's Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, where he was in charge of the Traffic Bureau, left, went back into business again very successfully, and then decided to go back into government to take on these major responsibilities of building the Second Avenue subway. We're really indebted to both Rick Cotton and Mike Radonjianu. It is not the usual story that a project of this kind comes in on more or less on budget and on time. And that's the story we're going to hear today. Michael?
I'm already challenged by a message on this thing, something about in the corner there. So should I say no or yes here? No. Okay. Let me see if I can get it that way. Okay. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here. I kind of feel awkward because last time I was supposed to be here, there was a snowstorm. And today is going to be a rainstorm, so I'm not sure that I have something to do with weather. So whatever I show, there is a storm of some sort. Let me start by actually saying a couple of words about mega projects. And mega projects could be many, but mega projects that happen in urban settings are not that common, and they are really a challenge to get to accomplish them. The millennials, that are the young people that now little by little become a majority of our customers, and they do not like to drive. They like public transportation. And public transportation, particularly in very heavily urbanized area, is a must if we are going to be able to survive, to thrive, and have the economic push that is required for a city like ours to stay prominent in the economy of the world. So the Second Avenue subway and other mega projects, I'm just going to tangentially touch on, are really a good example of what we need to look at and how and what type of lessons we ought to learn when we go ahead and build other projects of the same magnitude. So when I look at a Second Avenue subway from a historical perspective, we have a long history of starts, stops, interruptions since the 20s. And you can also see the dismantling of the Second Avenue L that happened in 1940. And then the Third Avenue in 1955, leaving us only with the Lex line that has been the busiest subway line that you can have anywhere. It carries about 1.5 million passengers a day. That is something that is nothing to sneeze at, and anyone living in the Upper East Side knows that if there was some oil there, they could be packed as sardines. But Mayor Lindsay in 1970 decided to actually start the construction of Second Avenue. And I know for a fact that I know, besides Sid, I think Jay Kriegel is here too. At that time, 3 sections were actually completed. There are more that there was a 4th contract in the village that never went through. And the 2 of the sections uptown, 99 to 105 and 110 to 120 were actually completed. There was another piece of work done at the foot of the Manhattan Bridge that probably will never be used for the Second Avenue going forward. But I know for a fact that it has been used by entrepreneurial young kids to hold parties there, as illegal as that they may have been. Most recently, an effort was started, and in effect, the EIS was completed on the Second Avenue in 2004, and we started construction. At least we broke grounds in 2007. Construction in earnest started in 2008, and revenue service began as planned on December 31st, 2016, with the Governor Cuomo inaugural New Year's train ride. The profile of the project, as envisioned now, is the phase one that was open 96 to 63rd. Then going south, it will go all the way to, this is called the Q line, and it starts at 96th Street, and that will follow all the way into Brooklyn. I used to say to all of the people on the Upper East Side that they can visit their relatives in Coney Island and vice versa, probably more the other way. The second phase that is underway right now, that we started the design work, is to 125th Street, and hopefully if there will be some movement with new starts that have been kind of slowed down in Washington, hopefully the feds will come up with the additional money so we can actually complete that. And then phase three, this is the largest one, from 63rd to Houston Street, and then the last one, that's phase four, Houston to Hanover Square. Just for the record, when this was put together and people did an estimate of, and it was done in 2000 and I think $4. Everything was supposed to be done with about $22 billion. I think that that's a dream that has gone a long way, and that will be much more expensive because time is money, and that's kind of taxes us as we go along. The challenges that we had, and I'm going to start with one of the biggest challenges that we have, is the hidden and extensive infrastructure that we have in the city of New York. And since one of the things that I've done when I worked at DOT was to build streets, rebuild streets and roads, and I had to deal with the myriad of utilities, we have the distinct, value of not knowing where the utilities are. We do not know. As a result, that's really, we do a lot of poking in the ground to find out what they are, and there are many. We talk about thousands of miles of water mains, gas mains, sewer lines, and in Manhattan we have the 100 miles of the steam network. We have miles of cables. So all of these things present an incredible challenge for us as to how we're going to build our subways. Just as a lessons learned, I just put a picture of utilities up at 94th Street, just to show you, and these are new utilities that we put in place, so obviously we know where they are now. That's not going to stay there for long because these utilities are constantly being changed by the buildings that are being constructed all over, and that's a real issue that we need to deal with. What we need to do in order to overcome all of these things going forward is to do more surveys, condition assessments, and then relocate all utilities prior to starting the construction underground. That should be done under separate contracts, and this is what I refer to as design, bid, build. Cannot be design, build, because you don't know, you're gonna pay up front a lot of money for people to discover what you should discover during a design process. So that should all be done as a lesson going forward in all of these projects ahead. We had other challenges, particularly when we had to do cut and cover, and we did it at 96th Street, where we were blasting next to buildings that were 1889 buildings with rubble foundations. We put slurry walls, and you can see there a cage that is about 120 feet tall that is actually vertically being lowered to create a slurry wall. So these walls are actually needed in order to create the box that eventually will house the subway. We also had to relocate all of the sewers outside the subway environment and put them next to the building. So we had to actually support them about 6 feet away from building. And we had to maintain, while we did all of these things, vehicular and particularly pedestrian traffic. We are very good, or we're better in doing vehicular traffic, not as good as doing pedestrians. So when you talk about fragile buildings, just to get a sense of it, the picture in the middle shows a building in which actually the wall was about to move away and detach. So what we needed to do is to anchor the wall, and you can see the various studs there to the inside, and you can see the picture to the left is that. And then we had a similar situation on a number of buildings, and their addresses are there, in which the facades were detaching from the buildings. And every time you go in and you do any work, that gets worse and worse. This is another situation in which we had a building that was fully occupied. And before we got there, the building was leaning out, and it's hard to see it. You can see it better on this picture. It's kind of leaning out about 6 feet, 40 foot tall, and I thought it was an optical illusion when I look at the picture. Turns out that was for real. We had to evacuate the building and actually braze the building and tie it to the core just during construction. It cost us close to $1 million to do that. And then the building was actually demolished, and now there is a 12-story building going up on that spot. So what we learned from that is that you have to identify this situation prior to the building process. What we did in order to address that issue was to say, well, the contractors are going to go out there, inspect that, and they will fix it. Well, guess what? Contractors are not in the business of actually fixing anything that we say unless they put a price on it. And there was absolutely no way to do that unless we did the proper inspection. So we need to do advanced survey and monitoring, because every time you go and you work in New York, next to very old building, you may create settlements, you may create vibration, new cracks show up, so monitoring is a must, and we have to deploy instrumentation to monitor building movement before construction, so you establish a baseline. This is actually a blast that, actually this is at 86 feet. And the reason I just put it in, so you can get a sense, and this is obviously just lasts about 4 or 5 seconds in reality, right? And this is something that it's a very, very important to understand. Although it happens about 100 feet below ground, it does not mean that there are no impacts. And this is actually, this is how we got to finish on time. So there are lots of issues that we need to deal with, and is dust, noise, vibration. All of these things needed to be addressed, and they were not addressed as part of the design process. Engineers in general, as I will say it again later on, are very good of optimizing what they do, but they don't necessarily address a lot of the issues that the people that live there have. And we had to consider the community impacts, encapsulate environmental impacts, blasting limitations. We allow contractors to blast until 10 p.m. at night. That meant that children will go to sleep and then wake up, and keep the parents awake for a number of hours. That did not endear us to the population, and you'll see how many people we had to actually deal with. So we created these mock houses. These are 250 feet long, about 45 feet tall, and about 30 feet wide. So this is massive, and people that are, if you look at over there, the 5th floor, they had a great view of a white wall for about 2 years. But we are able to actually load all the trucks that are hauling the spoils within that. So, and the muck was brought from below, and it was placed in the trucks that you see here, and that's how they left. So we will not, in effect, create dust and additional pollution on the streets. There are geotechnical challenges, and again, many times we save money in a design phase, and we spend lots of money after that. So this is a good example that post-bid, it was determined that we are set to start actually the tunnel boring machines on the east side of 2nd Avenue when we discovered that the quality of the rock was poor, was fragmented. We had to stop. We took a machine that just the head was 200 tons and is about 800 feet long, and we moved it to the west side in order to freeze the ground to create a condition that we can actually get a TBM there. So we had to resequence and also maintain schedule. That's quite tricky because everything was scheduled in a certain way. But one of the things that's important to understand in this type of projects is that you have a plan, and the plan changes day one. It's almost like a war, that you train for a military thing, and by the time you get there, and trust me, I've been in at least one war, you get there and everything that you learn changes day one. So you have to be able to actually be able to make the adjustments needed to succeed. So we have to perform extensive geotechnical investigations, and going forward on the 2nd Avenue, second phase, we're doing just that to avoid schedule delays and cost impacts. Building within the densest populated area in the US, and this is the Upper East Side, is a huge challenge. We have 216 census tracts of over 100,000 residents in New York City, okay? And the red areas are just that. So you can see that the green line goes straight through that. Only 3 other places within the US, San Francisco, Chicago, and Boston, have one such census tract, and there are, just for the purposes of being correct, 3 more in the US. There are prisons, and I don't think anyone cares. They like tunneling, by the way, so that's something that they will be very happy to do it. What's the lessons here from this thing is that we need to build trust. And one of the things that, the idea that we're government and we knock on someone's door and we said, we have something to give you, and people run away, right? So the question is, how do you build trust? And you have to communicate often and openly, deliver on promises made, and that's why build trust shows up twice. Trust is what really allowed us to proceed and build this thing. And there are lots of things to do it, and there are pictures there on tours that I've done with various representatives, primarily from the community. I went to schools to make sure to harness children to be my allies, because they loved what I did, and they went home and they told the parents that hated me, so that was an advantage. And then we did something that we normally don't do. We got people in one room, they're called workshops, put them around tables, ask them to identify problems, and I used to tell them up front, this is not a bitching session, this is a session in which you're gonna identify problems, and you're gonna provide some ideas and solutions. We had to be a good neighbor. And again, I said something about engineers. Engineers tend to design very effective and efficient, and as a result, they would put in 6-foot sidewalks during construction. You cannot even open the hatches to the stores on 2nd Avenue on a 6-foot sidewalk because you just block the sidewalk. So these are little things that need to be addressed. Contractors really are not the neatest people around. So you needed to, we needed to actually make sure that contractors abide by some criteria. And quite frankly, the way we enforced it, we just did not release payments at the end of the month. So that got their attention, and they actually made sure that they kept things clean. The community outreach, again, I'll start from the bottom. I've spent 73 Saturdays giving tours. And over 2,100 people participate in those tours. So that was the best investment that I could make, and make sure, and that hopefully, and other phases of such projects of this magnitude, that's going to be emulated, because it's very important that people understand, people that you build in front of their living rooms for a period of 9 years, that you're there and you make sure that you're the ultimate person that is in charge and responsible. We have a community information center, and we already are opening one for the 2nd Avenue sometime at the end of April, beginning of May, up in Harlem. These are things that are very important. We brought children, 2,900 students participated in all of these things. So we had 25,000 visitors from 2013. So these are things that need to happen if we are to actually be able to be successful in building this type of projects in densely urbanized places. There are ancillary structures. This is the new thing. It has to do with fire protection, and every station has 2 buildings at either end. And the question is how we design them and how we integrate them. We can do better than what we have done. But a good example is at 63rd Street, the fan plant is at the corner. So unless you know it's a fan plant, you will not know. And we integrated into a plaza that we actually opened to make sure that that is really addressing the issues of an urban area and how people need to interact. We also have an elevator there. So the landscaping was, in effect, to soften the visual effect at the street level and create the proper environment. We did the same thing on 50th Street. This is for the East Side Access, in which we acquired, this is across the street from Maloney and Purcell, or Purcell and Maloney, I'm not sure. Lou, which one is it? Maloney and Purcell, right, the restaurant. And we created a park, a pocket park, and it's open, and it's really a great addition to the area. This is on 2nd Avenue. These are the buildings that we put up there, and we created small retail at the bottom. I don't think that yet to be activated. In the future, we should do more. That's really not enough to make sure that the street level is really properly addressed. On number 7, this is the entrance at between 34th and 33rd Street. What you see there in the back is a ventilation building that we constructed, and what we did is the related people are putting a building there, and that's the vent building is the one in yellow, and everything else is encapsulated. So here is a co-development, an idea that allows actually for our site to be in effect integrated with development. In general, I just want to make sure that we all understand that. Mega projects have risks, and one cannot eliminate the risks, okay? We have to acknowledge that there are risks, we have to manage the risk, but you cannot just make believe they don't exist. We need to, on every project, when it's done, do a post-audit to better assess future risks, because you learn from the past and you try, and many times the people that build one will not move to the next one. Some will, some not, but you need to get the knowledge, and the knowledge has to move forward. And one of the things we're doing right now, putting together a book, call it, in which we will actually address all of these things and put it on paper so people will actually have something to look at if they want to read it, right? So hopefully someone will say, you better read it. We need to, understand that mega projects are really intertwined with our economic activity, and accessibility is a must. So many times when mega projects are being proposed, cost and schedules are generally overly optimistic. And that has been the case historically, going back to the Suez Canal, that everything that has been done cost anywhere between twice to 4 times as much as people propose. So one should not use everything goes according to plan approach. And that's normally how people do it. We're all very optimistic, everything is gonna go according to plan, we're gonna get it done. No, it doesn't happen that way. And we need to utilize the most likely scenario as the cure to that, and determine, to the extent that we can, the worst case scenario by analyzing various negative conditions that we may encounter. Just give you an example, this has been put together in June 2009. And I presented that to the CPAC, to the board at MTA. In March of 2008, MTA had reassessed the value of how much it's going to cost to build the Second Avenue to 4347. And that was on the hills, if you recall, at the time under Bloomberg administration, they were going to toll the bridges. And there was an attempt to actually quantify how much money we will have, need, and so forth. So that was that. So in June 2009, we did an analysis, and we did the one that everything goes right, and that was the 4.307 million. What we considered to be the worst, that was 4775, completion July of 17, and then we established a budget and a date of completion that we have established that can be managed at. So it's important that going forward, the same approach is being taken on projects. Otherwise, we're gonna end up having to recalibrate every time something. That's not something that you wanna do. To the right of the screen, FTA has their own estimate, and FTA was by far more pessimistic as to what we can achieve. And I'm really happy to say that we are able to get the project done by December 16 and on budget. Now, the final takeaway is really the accountability principle. Establish trust. Talk the talk, walk the walk. You can't tell people a story. People are much smarter than that, and you have whatever work you do in this type of projects where you are there a long time. This is not a project that you fix the road and in 9 months you are out of there. This is a project that is going to be there for a long, long time. So you need to actually be truthful, and establishing trust is the most important thing. One of the things that we need to change, though, is there is something called the rule-based approach versus performance spec. And the rule-based approach says you design it, you bid it, and you build it. And you build it according to all of the rules that we as a customer or as the owner will tell you. And by the way, these rules, unfortunately, are flexible. They change because you find new things. So you're increasing the likelihood of cost by actually having a rule-based approach, because you're taking away the certain risks away from the contractor, and the contractors are very smart, and as they find a way to go through, they will, and they will actually shower you with change orders. Therefore, you're going to end up paying a lot. The design build is a better way for a certain type of the work, like all of the civil work that is done, you want to do it because you want to allow the contractor to be creative. Now, let's not fool ourselves. Contractors are not stupid. There are risks. They will cover their risks in their bid. But what we have as a client now, we will actually have a much more certainty on cost because the risk will already be acknowledged up front. So design build has to be a very important ingredient going forward and apply properly to actually deliver projects better and with a much more or enhanced cost certainty. Not necessarily going to be cheaper, but they will have cost certainty. The risk will be acknowledged upfront, so you're not going to have to die by 1,000 cuts. Every time there's another change order, they're going to go after you. With that, I thank you, and
I now invite Rick Cotton to come up. I should say that the slides will be on our website. All of these talks are archived, and you can go on and you can hear the talk again and see the slides. They'll be up this afternoon.
Thank you, Ross. Pleasure to be here. I should start out by saying, particularly as I see many people in the audience and listening to Michael's talk, I have either the advantage or disadvantage of knowing almost nothing about the construction and infrastructure business. I'm a year and a half into this, and so I'm going to talk more about than Michael. Michael laid out a lot of the construction challenges. I'm going to talk about the sausage making and the organizational challenges of large organizations and government in particular in managing construction in general and certainly mega projects. I think you have to start by acknowledging the complexity and the level of difficulty just in, again, laid out by Michael. The construction challenges are difficult. They've gotten much more difficult over the years as more technology has been added to these projects. More exacting safety and environmental requirements have been added on, far more regulatory oversight, and there's a maze of governmental agencies that have their fingers in one part of the pie or another. If you start with the government agent, all of the projects that I work with, they're being managed and run by an agency. But government does not do construction. Michael is a very unusual, experienced executive. The MTA has moved its mega projects, but the definition of mega projects, there are a lot of very large projects that are left elsewhere in the organization. Government does not do construction. Government performs, and it's true of many private organizations who think about what is their core competency and then think about bringing in either outsourcing or bringing in other organizations who have a particular competency that lies outside their core competency. The MTA has moved in terms of creating the capital construction organization, and there are other examples, obviously. There's the School Construction Authority, there's the city in terms of DDC has tried to address it by trying to create particular agencies that are expert in construction, but that is not uniformly true across the government. And therefore, you wind up with government agencies managing projects which, first of all, do not have a deep bench of experience. And I'll come back to what Michael said, which is if you look at the standards in the industry in terms of these mega projects, the standard in the industry is that projects, by definition, are going to take longer and cost more than the original estimate and pricing for a whole variety of reasons. But that's the standard in the industry, and you're asking government to step in and set a timetable, set a budget, where the industry comes to the table through not only the management of the construction, but the other line of business they have, which is filing claims and driving cost up. And as Michael said, the contractors have become very, very skilled at that, to the extent that one government official who has spent a lifetime in the oversight of major projects said that his encapsulation of a mega project is that it is a series of near-death experiences. And so much can go wrong in construction, so much will go wrong in construction, that the challenge is actually managing against that. So then you come to the fundamental agency dynamic itself, which is the decision-making process. The ability, the words speed and government don't easily go together. And why is that? It is because there are, which is, I would say in general a good thing, there are checks and balances built in. So every time something has gone wrong in an agency's past, it has added another layer of approval. It has added another regulatory experience because it's a good thought process. Well, wait a second. This went wrong today when the same thing went wrong, pick your time, a year, 5 years ago. No one in the government is going to, as a thought process, is not going to be able to say, oh, well, I learned from that experience, so I put in this other level of review. I put in this other regulatory requirement, and as Michael observed to me in one conversation we had, once a requirement, an approval, a process has been put in, it never goes away. So what you wind up with in terms of many government agencies is that they have an allegiance to their process, and the issue of schedule is, as a cultural matter, it's been encapsulated in saying what a deadline means is it's time to set another deadline. So there is not an orientation, again, from a governmental, maybe generally big organization point of view, in terms of managing to a deadline. Now, I think you have to stop and also talk about the fact that this is not necessarily, so if you're an executive sitting in one agency, you are not in control of your fate. There are sister organizations within your agency, peers, you have peers. There are organizations outside, regulatory agencies. If you're building something as an MTA project, and Michael showed you the picture of the utilities that are under the street, there are city agencies that control those approvals, permits, the utilities, approval processes, permits, and federal. So if you're sitting within a governmental agency, the notion that in terms of speed, you come across an unforeseen condition and you start to think about, well, now I'm going to change it, the contractor's going to change it. There's a whole raft, a process that you have to go through, and you're not in control of that. So the challenge in those situations is how do you drive quick decision-making, and if you then come to the construction process itself, I completely agree with Michael in terms of design build and its advantages. I make, by the way, the comment in general from a governmental point of view is that building in incentives into the structure, which the design build process is intended to do, it's a very helpful tool. But the reality is, which I have to say I was surprised to learn, is that liquidated damages are, which is the primary incentive typically built in, just don't work. I mean, it is the rare case, if ever, that liquidated damages are assessed, because they simply get negotiated out at the end. And because of the legal framework in terms of the amount liquidated damages can be in the context of these large projects, my experience is that they're almost irrelevant. Then within the agencies, again in terms of the construction process, and this is something that came up repeatedly in the Second Avenue subway framework, is that there's an enormous raft of change orders, approvals that have to be gotten if an unforeseen circumstance comes up or the design, and this is the problem with design bid build, is the design may not actually be practicable in the field. The design may leave out. It's intended to design, particularly when you have multiple general contractors involved, as there were in the Second Avenue subway. There are gaps. So there's 1,000 feet of conduit that was supposed to be installed. 300 feet was assigned to this contractor, 300 was assigned to that contractor, and 400 wasn't assigned to anybody. So now you're into a change order, a scope change, and then the question is, how much is that going to cost? And who internally has to approve it? And then you have the whole inspection process, which is typical in construction, obviously, which is before you go to the next stage, you have to get something approved. You need an inspection, you need an approval. Sometimes that's internal. In the case of the Second Avenue subway to the MTA, sometimes it's external. Well, the MTA had to change its entire inspection protocol in order to get it done. So the other thing I would say, just now turning to the Second Avenue subway in particular, is that a year and a half ago, or a year and a half before December 2016, in my opinion, there was zero chance that the Second Avenue subway was going to get finished by December 2016. Now, with the encouragement of the senior executive of the state, Michael and his colleagues turned to the question of how did you get it over the finish line? They got approval from the MTA board to spend $62 million in acceleration payments. And then the management process internally for the year and a half before, beginning in the fall of 2015, the management process in terms of all of these challenges changed dramatically in terms of really giving Michael the authority that he needed and the help that he needed in terms of if there were permits that were coming slowly, if there were other agencies that weren't being responsive, in terms of slowing down, not ending, but slowing down the cascade of change orders that in terms of, take the MTA, the operating agencies, gee, I don't really like X. I know it's in the design, but I want Y. And at some point, and the contractors are vociferous about this, if the change orders don't stop, the job's never going to get done. So what I would just say as the bottom line is that if the management of these projects, as a general matter, are left to the normal decision-making processes of an agency, any agency, just the inertia of the agency, the reluctance of people to make decisions, another thing which is problematic, which you can't really blame people for if you're in the mid-level of an organization, making a decision which goes wrong is career-threatening. Not making a decision and have somebody else make it, or have gone through 6 levels of processes so you can say, well, I didn't really make that decision, all these other people signed off on it. It all just tends to slow things down. So what I would say as my final comment is that in terms of managing projects like that, you need not only a specialized expert set of managers like Michael, but you need a framework around them which breaks through, and I'm not really being critical, it's just, it'd be like complaining that the sky is blue. The fact is that big organizations struggle with rapid decision making, and you need to figure out and put in place what is constant attention to what is the problem, what is slowing things down, and what can get them back on track. And if you have the right internal resources and you enable them and they have that constant support, I think you wind up with an on-time project like the Second Avenue subway.
We now have open mic questions, but let me ask Sid Davidoff or anybody from your firm or the Sandhogs, if you, as special sponsors, if you'd like to make a comment quickly or first, we offer that opportunity. Otherwise, we'll go to the.
No, thanks.
Let's go to the microphone so because we're, yeah, right there. This will be televised, and So we
Then
need
I'll
you
be
on the mic.
careful what I say. Thanks, Russ. On behalf of the tunnel workers, the Sandhogs, and Rich Fitzpatrick, the head of the union, and our firm, we were happy to do this morning. I know Michael for, when he didn't speak English so good, and for a long time, a good friend, and we've lived through these years of seeing it. We saw the tunnel early on when it was not really a tunnel, and we were there on New Year's Eve with the governor when he had it, and I got to tell you, there's been a lot of things in this city. We go back a lot of administrations. I've had a lot of fun. But to see this develop and come along and grow and become a reality is one of the most exciting things I've ever seen in the city. Congratulations.
Okay. In the back, let's go to the back microphone. State your name, please, and
Name William Stanford Jr. K. Mr. X. As I previously stated at previous MTA public hearings regarding the Second Avenue Stubborn, which is a joke, I said there should be 4 tracks, not 2. And I also stated certain action stations should be added. But as usual, no one was listening. And I'm saying it here, at a non-MTA public hearing. The Second Avenue Stubway is a joke. You have 2 tracks, not 4. You want to ease the congestion, build 4 tracks, 2 express, 2 local, at Certain Action Station, because there's a bigger gap. Without it, there's a big gap to 86 and Certain stations.
okay, wait, that's a good question. Let's have Michael answer about the 4-track. Michael, just what would that have done?
There was originally considered looking at a larger footprint, and there are anything else that happens, there are cost limitations, and as you are moving outside the footprint of Second Avenue, would have had additional impacts on adjacent properties with additional cost attached to it. As such, the decision was made at a time when this was a major investment study, and it goes back to the 90s, that's when it happened. The decision was to only maintain 2 tracks. However, there is flexibility because there are crossovers at various locations in order to allow the traffic to move by, to be bypassed in the event of a breakdown. So the answer is a very simple one. You have to look at the cost and what you're getting for the money and your affordability, and I think the decision was made to go that route.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
I'm George Bulow. My question is about basically 3 projects. When the number 7 was extended, the TBM machine did run, I think, at 11th Avenue and 41st Street for a future station, and the city decided not to pay for it at this time. I noticed, however, that on the east side line, on the 2nd Avenue line, there appears to be no 79th Street stop now or planned for the future. At the same time, if one sees in the East Side Access Project, trying to go underneath the Harold interlocking and swing the...
Could you bring your question to a close to the
I
other
will.
people?
Swing the tracks so that they can meet the tunnel properly has run into some unexpected problems. Can you comment on the question of how one goes about deciding whether or not to have an important intersection used or not used? And secondly, if you have some idea now on the plan for the completion of the East Side Access Project for the Long Island Railroad.
The decision as to where to locate stations is normally made based on a travel demand forecasting as to how many people will utilize a specific location. When you look at a 2nd Avenue, and you mentioned 79th Street, we have a station at 72nd Street. We have one at 86th that, by the way, goes all the way to 83rd Street in terms of the entrances. So having too many stations at one point actually works against you because you're not able to actually reach the proper speed, and the time that you spend in a station, the dwell time is actually impacting the ability of the line to move enough people. So the decision is really made in such a way to make sure that we service the area, you look at where the people are coming from and what you need. So the spacing for 2nd Avenue was appropriate. 72nd Street, the number 7 line, yes, there was a plan to put a station at 41st Street. Actually, I'm sorry to say that my first thing that I've done when I came to MTA is to decide not to award the work for the 41st Street station that was in the plan, just because there was no budget allocated for it. So that was at the time about $450 million that the city did not have. So that may answer you that question. Regarding East Side Access, we are actually expecting to be complete by December 22, and that date holds.
Let me just say that we like to end on time, so the people standing, you must please be short so that we can get everybody in.
My name is Richard Luthman. I'm an attorney. I have a quick question about, you talked about risk and really the ability to call an audible in assessing risk during the project, more towards the externality of community issues. We all know the Second Avenue subway, there were a lot of community issues, and they weren't thought about as comprehensively as they maybe could have been when the construction started. I also am seeing this myself with the Bayonne Bridge in Staten Island. The landowners adjoining the project have
Please bring your point to a question.
When you have a situation where we have 2-3 years of insurance the only externality that you're using to compensate risk, what the idea of putting up next, the idea of doing other things that make sense, when does that come to the equation? And how would you incorporate that going forward, other than doing a post-mortem during the project?
Oh, good. Question.
I can answer that. Yeah. Easy. Community relations should be integrated in the design process. Okay? So you do not just apply it later on. You start with that, you integrate it, and you do it continuously to make sure. And the Second Avenue, second phase, is doing just that. We already opened a community information center, will be opening in beginning of May. The design started, and the community outreach will be integrated in the design process.
Let's go. Yes, quickly.
Thank you. My name is Patrick. I help construction firms to improve their bids to win major projects. And it's interesting, you touched a lot on trust and community relations. When it comes to future skills in the engineering sector, are you expecting to see more focus not just on the engineering skill set, but also on community engagement, communications coming through, I guess, the future generation of skills in the construction industry? And if so, have you seen any examples of that happening in practice?
Well, there are lots of people today that graduate with a general liberal arts degree that probably is pretty much, and the communication is also part of it. So the point here is that if you integrate it early on, you're going to be able to hire these people and get them on board to deal with issues day one, rather than coming in as a kind of at the last moment to try to remedy a situation that has been created. So I don't think there is a paucity of people. We just have to allow and accommodate and invest upfront as part of the dollars, not only in design and construction, but also dealing with the community.
Next.
Hi, I'm Antonio Figueroa. I'm an architect, and you spoke about the scenarios of the design process and about how the most likely scenario should be the one that we're focused on. As a consultant, the most likely scenario presentation is one that most of our public clients are not really amenable to put it charitably. So how do you change that particular situation? Because from our point of view, we cannot make that process of defining all of the variables that are, or most are appropriate, unless you have a client that is receptive to looking at that. And that's not something that we find very often.
Look, I was a consultant for most of my life, and I've dealt with these things. And I will tell you philosophically my approach to it. You have to be able to tell your client what the truth is. And they have to make a decision in which direction they want to go. I know there is an issue here that you are kind of you are presenting it that if you go and you tell the truth, you may never get the job. That may be the case. But the point I'm making is that you owe your client actually to tell them what it is, because eventually, the truth will come up. And you'll tell them that you can do the job in X number of years and for Y dollars, and everything is twice as long and twice as much. You're not going to be the darling of your client, and you're going to be blamed later on. So the point is, try to be as much as possible, as accurate as you can in predicting what it is. And I was trying to make that point. It's needed if you're going to be successful.
I'll just make one comment, which is that another layer of the answer to that question is that mega projects in particular are going to be authorized by public officials who probably aren't going to be in office at the point at which the project actually gets delivered. So it is a big challenge for people to spend political capital, which is what it is, in order to get financing and to embrace a project that they're not going to be able to take credit for. That's just a dynamic. The one thing I would also say, though, is that the design-build concept, which Michael comes back to the fact you're going to pay somewhat of a premium because people are going to build in a contingency. It does turn the incentives the right way, because it puts the designer together with the construction contractor. But the other thing that it does, which is it does increase cost certainty, not to 100%, but that's a huge virtue when you're asking a public official to make a decision.
This is the last question. I apologize. We're over time, and we do want to end on time. So the last question.
Yes, my name is, it's really not a question. I just want to be thankful. My name is Keith Suba. I'm a community advocate in Coney Island, Brooklyn. I want to thank DHC for believing in my company. We have a minority company. And I wanted to thank you, Michael. I wasn't going to say anything, but dealing with community is very important when you come into someone's backyard and you're doing a job, that you deal with the people and you have a great understanding with them, because a lot of people, they just believe in what's going on in the project and not what's going on in the community around them. So as an advocate, I just like to say thank you for putting the community involved. And the other thing is there's the F train line and the N train line are under construction, as well as the L in Brooklyn. Will you have a community outreach center in Brooklyn soon that you will be putting together?
Although this is not my project, they will have that. The answer is yes. They will have a community. This is a very important project. It's not a mega project, but in terms of impact, it is really very significant, and the expectation is that, yes, they will have that.
Okay. Yes, you'll get the information. This brings this breakfast to a close. I want to thank both Michael Rodnachanu and Rick Cotton for an extraordinary morning of lessons. I think everybody learned a lot and put it together in this fashion on both sides of the equation, the construction side, the governmental side, I think was extremely helpful and an extraordinary morning. This will, as I say, will be on our website. You can get the slides and hear it again if you'd like. As we always do, we like to give a product of the scholarship to our speakers, and this time it's a book by my colleague David Schoenbrod. And the book is called DC Confidential, Inside the 5 Tricks of Washington. It's How to Cure Washington. So with great thank you, we present the books to our speakers today. We will see you at our next breakfast with John Miller from the police department.
Does it deal with the Trump?
Yes. Yeah.
Good seeing
David
you.
sends his regards. He's unable to come. And you saw you know what?
Hi, Bruce.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'll be quick. Can you face the sun, sir? Thank you.
Thank you. That was
Excellent. Really, and you know what? It's all the same lessons we learned in doing the BRT projects. It's like singing from the same. So, but also a question. So I thought you had said design bid build was more appropriate for a project like
No,
this.
I said.
So,
Yeah.
so I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, clarification. Design, bid, build. It's good for doing utilities, as an example. Design, bid, build may be appropriate when you do a certain system, communication. Design, build for all the civil work, definitely appropriate.